On the evening of April 23rd, 2025, the Huntsville unit in Texas was quiet eerily so, behind pale green walls and heavy steel doors. Moises Mendoza took his final walk. After 2 decades on death row, the appeals had run dry. There would be no last-minute stays, no legal loopholes. This was it. He moved slowly, guarded on both sides, not in shackles. His steps were deliberate, as if each one marked the fading heartbeat of a long, twisted life. Outside the execution chamber, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting golden light through narrow windows. Shadows stretched like long fingers across the prison floor. Inside the witness room, faces waited tight-lipped eyes, glassy, not with joy, but with something heavier. Fatigue, grief, perhaps even doubt. Among them sat Relle Tollison's mother, her 2 brothers, her uncle. They had lived 21 years in the echo of her absence. Mendoza said little. A chaplain walked beside him, murmuring scripture. He didn't respond. As he lay back onto the gurney, he looked toward the ceiling, blinked slowly, and whispered something only the nurse caught. Make it quick. The IV lines were checked. A short prayer was offered. And just before the curtain drew shut, Mendoza turned his head toward the glass. But the story of his death, like so many, didn't begin with a gurney and a needle. It began on a quiet street in a small town with a baby crying and a mother who never came to the door. In March of 2004, Farmersville, Texas, was the kind of place where you didn't lock your doors. Kids played until the streetlights flickered on and neighbors waved as they passed each other in the grocery store. It was small-town America, humble, quiet, predictable. That quiet was broken on the morning of March 18th. Relle Tollison was 20 years old. A young mother, a daughter, a friend, a woman. Rebuilding her life after a difficult marriage, she'd been staying in a modest 1-story house on the edge of town, just her and her 5-month-old baby. Avery. Relle was soft-spoken, but sharp. The kind of woman who remembered your birthday and brought extra napkins just in case. She had dreams, even if they were still small. Finish school. Maybe start nursing. Give Avery a good life. The day before she vanished, Relle had visited her mother. She laughed, fed Avery, and left just after 10 p.m. Smiling. Nothing seemed unusual, but the next morning, her mother knocked on the door, and no one answered. The front door was unlocked. Inside, chaos drawers yanked open. Furniture shoved aside. The kitchen floor was scattered with papers, her divorce documents face down, smudged with a muddy boot print. Her purse sat untouched, her car still outside, and there on the flipped-over bed, little Avery was crying alone. It was a picture no one in Farmersville would ever forget. A young mother gone, without a trace, and a child too young to speak, too small, to understand what had just shattered. That morning, the quiet town stopped being quiet. At first, they searched with hope. Neighbors poured out of their homes, boots crunching on dirt roads and fields, voices calling her name into the wind. Police officers on ATVs and horseback scoured every corner of Farmersville. Volunteers passed out flyers, knocked on doors, climbed fences, and peered into dry creeks. For 5 days straight, the town became a search grid, every barn ditch and shed examined, as if answers might be hiding just beneath a hay bale. But Relle never answered back. And then, 5 miles out of town, where the trees grow dense and quiet, swallows every sound. Something was found. A hiker spotted a clearing. Ashes, charred logs. A strange chemical smell clung to the air. It looked like the remains of a bonfire, but something felt wrong. Too secluded, too deliberate. He called the police. What they uncovered would change everything. Beneath the scorched wood and a pile of half-burnt branches were the remains of a woman. A forensic team worked through the night. DNA confirmed the truth. It was Relle. She had been burned and then buried under brush in a desperate attempt to erase what had been done. There were no fingerprints, no weapon, no witnesses, just fire and silence. But someone had made a mistake. The logs used to burn her weren't just any logs. They were mesquite wood, saturated with a strange mix of metals and a rare concentration of titanium that meant something a possible match. Investigators collected burned wood from the crime scene and compared it to logs taken from a bonfire. Relle had attended the night she vanished. 8 logs from the woods, 3 from the fire pit. Lab results stunned them. Every single log from both places had the same chemical signature. It was the first time in U.S. forensic history that wood became the key to a murder. At first, the evidence pointed to someone close. Detectives focused on Andrew Relle's estranged husband. The divorce had been messy. There were arguments, accusations, and he had been at a bonfire the same night she vanished. Convenient. Too convenient. But when questioned, Andrew said he had been drunk, barely remembered anything, and hadn't left the party. Dozens of guests confirmed it. He was there, stumbling, incoherent, useless. But someone else had brought the firewood that night. His name was Moises Mendoza. He was 21. Had known Relle from high school. After she and Andrew split, he had shown interest in her. Told people he might have a shot now. But Relle wasn't interested. She made that clear to her friends, to him. At first, Mendoza denied everything. Said he saw her at the party. Nothing more. Then his story changed. He admitted giving her a ride, said she came willingly, that she wanted to leave with him. But no one believed that Relle would have never left her baby behind. Not for anyone. The next time detectives brought him in, the tone shifted. He wasn't defensive anymore. He was calm, cold, and then he talked. He said that after the bonfire, Relle got into his truck, that they drove for a while, that something changed. He claimed they argued, that she insulted him, that he snapped. He said he choked her once, then again, then dragged her out of the truck into a field behind his house. He sexually assaulted her, choked her again, and then when she was nearly gone, he strangled her one last time until she stopped moving. Then he stabbed her in the neck. At first, he left her there thinking no one would ever find her. But when the news broke, when the town erupted in panic, he got scared. So he went back, shoved her body into his truck, and drove deep into the woods, built a fire, poured gasoline, watched her burn, then buried the ashes beneath a pile of brush, as if that would be enough. And the way he told it flat, emotionless, was somehow even worse than the act itself. There was no trembling in his voice, no regret. Just facts, like reading off a grocery list. And when detectives asked why he did it, why her, he looked down for a long time, then said, "I don't know. I guess she just didn't take me seriously." After Mendoza's confession, The pieces began to fall into place. Detectives searched his home. In the corner of his room, tucked beneath a pile of dirty laundry, they found a pair of heavy boots caked in soot, reeking of gasoline. Crime scene analysts examined the tread. The boot print, left on Relle's divorce papers, had a distinct ridge along the heel and a small tear along the outer edge. The match was perfect. Then came the jeans, buried under ash in an outdoor fire pit. Behind his house, they were charred stiff, almost forgotten. But inside, the denim investigators found what they needed: microscopic flecks of dried blood. They sent it to the lab. Days later, results confirmed what they already knew. It was Relle's blood, and still Mendoza said nothing. Not when they showed him the boots, not when they laid the jeans on the table, not even when they read the DNA report out loud. He sat in silence, no tears, no anger, no apology. The evidence kept piling up. Forensic scientists matched chemical traces on the burned wood to the fire pit behind Mendoza's house. The metal profile, the titanium, the mix of nickel and copper was identical. The pattern of combustion, the smell, even the ash told a story. It was all there, piece by piece. But in the end, it wasn't just the science that sealed his fate. It was the simplicity of it. He had confessed. He had described the crime in detail. And now the evidence matched every word. There would be no trial about guilt. The only question left was, should this man live or die? The courtroom was silent when the sentence was read. It had taken the jury just 3 hours. Moises Mendoza stood motionless, wearing a plain suit, his hands folded in front of him. He didn't flinch when the words were spoken: death by lethal injection. Under Texas law, the jury had to answer 2 questions before handing down a death sentence. First, is the defendant likely to pose a future threat to society? And second, is there any reason, any mitigating circumstance that should spare his life? To the first, they answered yes. To the second, they answered no. The prosecution had made their case with chilling precision. A violent, calculated crime. A man with a documented history of stalking women, who had once tried to abduct someone else just months before Relle disappeared. Someone who didn't just kill, he erased. Who tried to burn away the evidence, the face, the memory. The defense argued otherwise. They said Mendoza had grown up in poverty, had mental health issues, suffered trauma as a child, that he had been failed by society long before he failed Relle. But in the end, it didn't matter. The jury believed the risk was too great, that he would hurt again. That remorse, if it ever existed, had come too late. He was sentenced to die. From that day on, Mendoza began a new life on Texas death row, behind steel doors, concrete walls, under artificial lights that never dimmed. His world became a scheduled breakfast at 3 a.m. Lights out at 10. Silence in between. No physical contact. No windows. No future. For over 20 years, he filed appeal after appeal. His lawyers argued that his defense team hadn't done enough, that they missed signs of mental illness, of trauma, of humanity. They reached the state courts, the federal courts, even the Supreme Court. Each time, the answer was the same: appeal denied, sentence upheld. And so the days blurred into weeks, into years, until April 2025 came knocking. April 23rd, 2025, Huntsville, Texas. 6:12 p.m. Moises Mendoza was led into the execution chamber without resistance. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He laid down on the gurney like a man climbing into a bed he had made for himself years ago. Outside the window, the family of Relle Tollison sat quietly. Her mother, her brothers, her uncle. They had waited 21 years for this moment. But now that it was here, none of them looked relieved, only tired. Hollowed out by grief that never really faded, a chaplain stood by Mendoza's side, whispered prayers. He nodded once. The straps were tightened, the IV lines inserted. Then the warden gave the signal. Before the drugs began to flow, Mendoza turned his head toward the window where Relle's family watched. His voice was steady, no tears, but it didn't shake. "I am sorry for having robbed you of Relle's life," he said. "I took away your daughter, your sister, your niece. I took away her baby's mother. I know that nothing I could ever say will bring her back. But I want you to know, I am sincere." He paused, glanced at the corner of the room where no one sat. To her daughter, "I'm sorry I left you without a mom. I know you didn't ask for that pain." Then he turned his head to the other side, another window. Behind the glass were his wife, his sister, and 2 childhood friends. In Spanish, he whispered, "I love you. I am at peace. Everything is love." At 6:21 p.m., the drugs began to flow. Mendoza let out 2 sharp breaths. Then he began to snore. 10 deep, rattling snores, then silence. At 6:40 p.m., Moises Mendoza was pronounced dead. He was 41 years old. What is justice? Is it a verdict? A sentence? A needle in the arm of a man who took too much? Or is it something deeper, something quieter? 21 years passed between the night Relle Tollison vanished and the moment Moises Mendoza took his last breath. 2 decades of appeals, paperwork, silence, and in the end, a family still grieving. A child still growing up without a mother, and a man whose final words were, not angry, not proud, but not enough. Some would say justice was served, that the system worked. Others might wonder, was this closure or just another kind of pain? What would Relle say if she could speak? Would she want vengeance or peace? There are no easy answers. There never are. But if this story teaches us anything, maybe it's this: violence does not end with more violence. It ends when we remember the names of those who were lost and the lives they should have had. So tonight, don't remember the killer. Remember Relle Tollison, a daughter, a mother, a light extinguished far too soon. If this story moved you, if it made you think, feel, or simply remember someone you once loved, we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories that matter. Stories of justice, of loss, of love, and of what it means to be human, even in the darkest of times. And if Relle's story touched your heart, please leave a like. It helps more people hear her name, and it reminds the world that her life mattered.